What's up, everyone? Welcome into the All 22 NFL show, the official channel of the All 22 fantasy football platform. It's the only fantasy football game with full 53-man rosters, including offensive linemen, where you get to choose personnel packages and have access to PFF grading and advanced stats to make decisions each week. To learn more and go and sign up, go to all-22.com. If you do, I suggest you send an email to info@all-22.com, where we can put you in some really great leagues to get you started before you start a team for yourself or a league for yourself next year. Before we jump in, Ray, happy birthday, my
Oh,
man.
don't do
Listen,
that.
I didn't send it. I didn't send it at all today. I was going to let it slide. I was trying to make you nervous, thinking I forgot your birthday.
I
But happy
wasn't that
birthday,
worried.
dude.
Yeah,
You were
gee,
worried,
thanks.
bro.
The
You were
audience
worried.
the
You were
audience
giving me
doesn't
the
care.
cold shoulder when we were in the waiting room. You were like, hey,
The audience
Chris.
doesn't care. They don't care.
They care a little bit.
They
You know,
don't
get some
care about
happy
my
birthday
birthday.
texts.
Yeah, just means you're getting older. At this age, it's not fun anymore. So,
Any
but thanks.
words of wisdom for us young people?
There's probably going to be a lot of them littered throughout the episode. We should probably just jump in because it's like, I think there's a lot of lessons to be taken here, probably, if you're looking for that sort of thing. Or if you're just looking for chaos, we got that for you too.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So I wanted to do an episode about why fantasy football fans should be paying attention to the Hollywood style gambling scandal that's happening in the NBA. So for those of you that are not aware and live under a rock, a bunch of NBA players just got arrested, and coaches and past players just got arrested or charged. I would say charged, right? That's probably the right word.
Yeah,
Because
allegedly.
they were involved with some massive gambling ring. And we're going to talk about what actually transpired. I have a few notes on it, Ray, but before I do, did you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bigger story than probably what we're seeing on television and traditional media, but I think there's a lot more to come. And yes, there are two paths to this. There's the poker stuff, which doesn't really impact the NFL too much, and then there's the actual sort of game rigging type of issues with the Terry Rozier side of the fence that does sort of resonate among all sports. So we'll be, I think, focusing more on the impact on the NFL and sports in general and why this matters to you, more so than
Yes.
just playing rigged poker games, because that in itself is annoying. If you enter a game of poker and it's rigged against you, that's not pleasant. Not that I would ever be a part of that. I would not.
On October 23rd, 2025, federal authorities arrested 34 individuals linked to illegal betting and rigged poker schemes tied to NBA insiders. So key names, you said Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups is one, Damon Jones. So a bunch of like high level people within the NBA were part of this. And like you said, we think it's probably going to end up being a lot more. So what kind of things were they doing? Use of non-public insider info about injuries, playing time, substitutions, so that they were able to profit off of like prop bets. Some players were reportedly manipulating their own participation, exiting games to influence bet outcomes, and then also like mafia organization crime connected to the rigged poker games that you were talking about. So those are kind of the high level things that were kind of going down. And it really is kind of like historic precedent because, think about the MLB, right? We go back to like Shoeless Joe Jackson and the Chicago White Sox from 100 years ago, right? They basically were tied to some bet on the game, and the entire team got banned from baseball, right? Like like all of them. Uh, Pete Rose, the all-time MLB hit leader, supposedly was betting on games, but betting for himself. Same thing. They were like, okay, you're done. You could never be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So the MLB was taking a very hard stance on gambling. And then even going to kind of like current rules, you see, I think it was Jameson Williams, right? Like Jameson Williams was placing bets, but they weren't even like significant bets, and they weren't even maybe on football, but he was doing them in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they suspended him for like 6 games. So it seems like the NFL and MLB have historically taken a pretty hard approach on people that are caught gambling. But the thing that's really interesting about the NBA and what we're hearing as part of this report is that potentially the NBA knew about some of this and was placing out like bans, probations, suspensions, but not making any of it public, right? So, what does that tell us about the NBA and what they're doing and how it relates to potentially these other sports leagues? do we think we're actually seeing it all in the other sports? I think that's really the starting point.
No, we are definitely not seeing it all. Whether it's the cliche tip of the iceberg or not, the answer is definitely no. And the NFL, I think, has done, I guess, depending on your perspective, a fantastic job on some of this, in the sense that, like, a lot of people don't remember players like Shaka Toney, Quintez Cephas, CJ Moore were also handed suspensions for gambling on games over the last couple years. So active NFL players, and they were suspended, and that was pretty much all you heard about it. And yes, in the NBA, there's an outsized impact for a single player on the outcome of a game. Obviously, it's easier when you have prop bets involved individually. Whereas even as a in the NFL, if you're a wide receiver, unless you take yourself out of a game, I mean, prop bets, you're not fully in control of your outcome, right? As much as you are in other sports. So for the NBA side, no, we're not seeing all of it. I think the fact that Chauncey Billups wore a Clutch Sports hoodie to his hearing or whatever it was the day after was pretty darn telling.
Well, for the
right?
people,
That
tell
was
them
not
what that means.
So Clutch Sports is it's this big agency that's basically very closely tied to LeBron James, Rich Paul, and Damon Jones. They have a huge impact basically on all the on the NBA off the court when it comes to player representation. It's a massive. It's a big deal. Basically, they big moves in the NBA. Clutch Sports has their hand involved. Obviously, LeBron James is the darling of the NBA. It's their superstar, their megastar for the past 2+ decades at this point. And so there's a part that says, well, the NBA will do what they have to do to sort of protect that image. The other flip side of that coin is LeBron's kind of on the way out. He's not an up-and-coming superstar like perhaps a Shohei Ohtani was in the MLB, and we saw how they handled that, that episode over the last couple of years too. So sometimes outgoing superstars versus incoming superstars or ascending superstars are treated differently by these leagues and how they handle this. But to sort of bring it back to sort of the NFL, and the NBA, no, we are not seeing all of it. I think there's a lot still to play out. And when the feds are involved, you're going to see a lot more play out over the coming months. And you would hope that this doesn't really impact the NFL too much. It's also not a good look after we're just a couple of days removed from that officiating performance in the Giants-Eagles game. It's just not good timing either. But I do think any sort of outsized impact that was achieved by the NBA gambling saga, scandal, whatever you want to call it, would likely be more geared towards officials when it comes to the NFL than the NBA, because there are so many more moving parts on the field in any given play in the NFL compared to the NBA. But officials, on the other hand, can have an outsized impact with just one or two calls in a given game at a particular time. And it doesn't have to be as obvious as the last 2 minutes of a game, for example, either. So I think anything related to the NFL in that aspect would likely come from the officials when it comes to integrity of the game. And that's not me accusing any officials of anything. I'm just saying that would be a more likely impactful, sort of target for something like this than it would the NBA. And the NBA already did that. They've been there, done that. That's old hat for them.
You called out a couple like high profile ones that kind of transpired in the last few years, but LeBron James hasn't played basketball yet this year. Is that related?
No,
right? Like,
no. He's just old. Listen, it's my birthday today. I know what it's like to be old. He's just old.
Because I listened to, New York Times daily report on the investigation and stuff, and there's an unnamed person that was part of the investigation, and it was insinuating that it was very likely LeBron that was part of the investigation. They said that during one of the playoff games where he was hurt, there was like people putting information in behind the scenes that knew that was going to happen and placing bets, right? So like there was a chance that even if LeBron James wasn't part of it, right, and he wasn't somebody that was fixing games or sitting out on purpose, people were using the knowledge of his game to place bets, right? So, I mean, that takes a toll, like, right? Like, we talked about it during, like, the whole, like, Deshaun Watson scandal where, like, Deshaun Watson was coming back and it's like, hey, he didn't have a big injury that he was coming off of, but he's coming back from, like, this massive absence, and he had a lot of weight on his shoulders, right? And, like, that was my biggest concern is, like, you come back from something like that and it weighs on you, right? Not saying that's happening to LeBron because I think, again, LeBron probably didn't do anything that he needs to be concerned about, but sounds like maybe he was part of this process, which could again put a toll on a player. You look at Michael Jordan. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, right? But like in 1993 or 1994, when he decided to retire out of nowhere and then came back, a year later, and people were like, "Was that the NBA dishing out a suspension privately to Michael Jordan?" Right? And doing it in a way
Maybe
where they
allegedly, yeah,
allegedly, right? But like almost like very likely that that was the case. Shohei Otani, that's another great example because what do you do with the best player that you've had since Babe Ruth or Barry Bonds? Like, how do you just say like, yeah, they were betting on the game, so we have to suspend them for life now? When baseball's already such a struggling sport compared to the other ones, right? Like, I don't know, right? But now let's take it back to the NFL, right? And I think you're right, right? Like basketball, it's five people. The chance of one person having a huge impact is pretty massive compared to the NFL. But I think where things get really interesting is prop bets, right? So in the NFL, like you can place a prop bet on a receiver to have a touchdown or rushing yards or catches or whatever it might be. And if you were one of those players, you can very easily manipulate that prop bet, right? So I think that's my number one concern. And then you touched on refing. These refs make what, $150,000, right? Like, so you're telling me that if some mobster comes up to them and says, "Hey, change the trajectory of this game. We're going to give you 100 grand today just for this game," that one of those guys might not do that, right? Like, what do we do, right, with that information?
Yeah, it's hard because, and it sounds far-fetched. I'm sorry, it's not. If you recall, let's go back the 2022 season. It was week 18 when you had the Chargers and the Raiders. Sorry, 2021 season, I think, but it was January 2022. This was the end of the 2021 season, where if the Raiders and the Chargers had just ended in a tie, they both would have made the playoffs based on some game results that had happened earlier in the day. And so because of the sheer just sort of maniacal just evolution of the day, right, between the Jaguars and Steelers results happening earlier on that allowed for this completely unique, unlikely scenario to happen, it was kind of like a meme, like social media and meme just sort of taking a life of its own, to where just for fun, millions of people were placing prop bets on the game ending in a tie, regardless of the long odds placed on that result. And I mean, there were stories written about it on ESPN where the sportsbooks would have lost millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, if that game had ended in a tie. There was a last second field goal at the end of overtime to prevent that result. But when there's hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, and you have now the interconnection between the NFL, ESPN, and ESPN Bet. I know there was a story out there a couple days ago when this was brought up by, I believe, Craig Carton, where if so facto by ESPN and the NFL having this business relationship, the NFL has an incentive for ESPN Bet to perform well and to make money. Why not? Why wouldn't something like this happen? Even if it doesn't, even if you trust the integrity of everyone involved, the sheer fact that there is an incentive for a particular result over the other is really a new frontier for sports that we haven't seen before. I'm sure 20 years ago and early on, more than 20 years ago, I'm sure, but it was more so of like an old man yells at cloud thing for like, I don't care about your fantasy team, like players would say, right? But like, oh, would fantasy football teams, would that impact the way players go about certain things, as far as like maybe a running back doesn't slide down at the 1 yard line and actually runs to the end zone or whatever the case may be, right? And then that impacts spreads and whatever else. But that's really small potatoes, and you're really not allowed to. I think you were anyway. I'm probably sure that's still the case, where you couldn't really be in fantasy leagues like that. I know that's the case for some college employees, but I think this is a much larger scale than that, and this is where the concern really sort of comes to roost here, where it's not a hypothetical. It's not a, the crazy conspiracy theorist guy in the corner here, trying to make something out of nothing or something that's not there. No, it's here. It's literally everywhere. ESPN had to take down the ESPN bet banner when they were talking about this story the other day, on one of their morning shows. So it's legitimately intertwined such that there is business incentive for certain outcomes to happen in a given game. And it really isn't okay. It really is not okay. That shouldn't be.
No, and that's
yeah.
like our government letting us down, right? Like how do they let
Sure.
these things be connected that way? I mean, at the end of the day, that is always what it is, right? Because think about the fact that the odds are always going to be not in your favor, right? They're not ever going to put a bet in front of you that you're likely to win, right? They want you to lose. On top of that, they can add an extra layer of ref make 2 calls in our favor, and that'll even sway it. We know that that's going to sway it, an extra 2%, but that's all we need to make sure that we're cashing out significantly more bets, right? Or, they're keeping the money, the house is winning so much more just because of a call or two, right? They can do that. So I think that is the problem in all of this. But I think the NFL does a decent job of punishing players when these things happen. I am somebody that I would actually push for lifetime bans for anybody that's caught gambling on their own sport. I don't care if it's a different team than you. I don't think you should be able to bet on your own sport. Go bet on baseball, go bet on basketball. But football players should not be allowed to bet on football. So that's just one of my personal bets. I think they need to make sure that there are harsher penalties, clear rules, beefing up integrity with these referees, right? Like the ones from the Eagles game, right? Like if that was to happen now after this, I think there should be like thorough investigations by a third party, not by the NFL, because at the end of the day, for example, if you were one of those people that placed a bet on one of those basketball games, you should have a right to take action against the sports book and the NBA for the money that you lost and right, like, and more than that, right, for the time and effort that goes into it. So like, who is defending you in those situations? I think there should be third parties that have to go into it. But going even further back to all 22, why is this important, right? One of the reasons we created all 22 is so that every single player on the field has a purpose and is part of a game and has an opportunity for promotion and media for themselves. Like Jason Kelsey is probably the only offensive lineman that has a real platform and people know him by face, right? Like that just doesn't really exist. And it's getting better, I think, over time. That's what companies like PFF and All 22 are trying to do. But I do think there's a little bit of a problem where you're talking about these receivers or running backs that will do something, like you said, like rush into the end zone instead of sliding because it's good for them and their image and not necessarily for their team or the NFL. Let's take a step back from all of that, right? Let's create a product that promotes the kind of football we want to watch. That's part of what we want to do, right? That's part of what All 22 is here to do. And hopefully it really does have an impact in the long-term, scheme of things.
Yeah. And I hate to give the NFL props, even though this is what we talk about and what we do, but like, I do think they generally have done a very good job when it comes to policing this. And this is, for all intents and purposes, an opportunity for them, while the NBA has this spotlight on them, to make sure that their house is in order and what else can be done to prevent something like this from happening. Whether it's on the player side, the official side, team employee side, whatever the case may be. This is a good opportunity for them. And regardless of all of the gripes that we have with Roger Goodell and how the league is run and the Players Association, I think when it comes to stuff like this, they do a good job of keeping their house in order, or at least keeping the appearance as such. And so, this could be a good thing, quote unquote, for the NFL when it comes to this, if it allows you to sort of take another look internally with some fresh eyes. And again, keep your house in order. So, let's hope the NFL can take advantage of that, because nobody wants to see this happen to a great sport like this, right? I mean, it's not even the first time it's happened to the NBA over the last generation, even. So, again, it's the greatest game there is. So let's keep it that way and ensure that nothing can kind of get in the way of that. And we'll continue to complain about the stuff that we complain about that are legitimate gripes, but hopefully nothing that rises to the level that truly compromises the integrity of the game, like we are seeing with the NBA.
No, absolutely. And, in football, the position you really do need to worry about is quarterback, right?
Yeah.
But luckily, most quarterbacks make a lot of money. And hopefully, an extra $100,000 to throw games, not something enticing enough to make that actually happen, right? So, that is the hope in the NFL. But I do think, while we kind of give these guys a hard time with how much money they actually make, maybe some in the silver lining, that's what it is, right? It's that's a good thing, because hopefully they don't take offhand back pocket money from mobsters for them to throw games, right? Like, silver lining, that's pretty good.
So you're telling them to go after the Arena League players, is what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely.
The
XFL
guys.
If you are betting on arena football, please put your name in the comments, because I think that's awesome. I will come deliver you a high five.
Awesome. Although I will say too, and it's a legitimate thing, you see it at all the ads, but gambling is an addiction like everything else. Sometimes it's not always just about the money. It's the high, just like any other addiction that people fight. Quarterbacks, though, I mean, they're pretty much all addicted to football anyway. I think you have to be to excel at this level. So that's another part of it too. So.
No, absolutely. And if you are somebody that needs help, there are plenty of places to go get it. I don't know what those are, but maybe we'll put it in the comments so that it's there, right? Because I think it is important. But everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We just wanted to make this a quick one, go over something we thought was really important. Please give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X at all22_PFF, and give us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, and have a great rest of your day. Ray, happy birthday.
Oh, jeez.
Go.